Shalom, everyone. Welcome to Wednesday night. We're going to be studying the cosmos. Well, actually, not really. What we're going to talk about is the cosmic clock, and we're going to be counting down to the great Shabbat, which is the seventh millennium. We are getting close. Now, as I was thinking, there are so many things that I want to say at the same time, but to do that I'd have to let you into my head, and I don't think anybody'd want to come there because it'd be a nightmare. But I do want to begin to look at the end of this millennium. And before finishing our study of Zechariah, I have this lesson. I have another lesson that I want to teach you. Again, I want to go back through Daniel, the 70 weeks, basically to get you ready for the end. Now, before we start, I want us to think about last week. Then I attempted to explain to you the spiritual possibilities that are wrapped up in this brand new year that we're in. Now, in the United States, we're in the year 2025 still, but in Jewish understanding, the year is 5786. It's known by the Jews as the year of divine connection and refinement. And so we're going to talk about this coming year, but we're also going to frame it in the idea of how this sixth millennium has turned out. So I want to back up a step or two, and I want to introduce a great rabbi who deals a lot with the sixth millennium. Now, he didn't live in it, but he was a great sage, and the person I'm referring to is Rabbi Eliezer ben Solomon Zolman. That's enough to say, but he is known by the name the Vilna Gaon. Vilna comes from the idea of the city that he lives in Lithuania. It was Vilna. Gaon means a genius. So he was the genius of Vilna. Now he saw creation and time. Well, it was on a cosmic clock, not as you and I normally think of time. And I want to give you a rough idea of what I'm saying. So I'm going to try, if I can, to pull up. Is it there? No. Well, then I won't pull it up. I could have swore I had it printed, but no. Okay. You're going to have to listen to me as opposed to being there. And for those who receive a copy of my lesson, you already have it, so you know what I'm going to be talking about. But for those who don't, you're more than welcome to write me, and I will be glad to send you copies of all of my lessons or anything that you want that I've actually made over the period of time. But we're going to talk about the years 6,000 to 7,000. Now, 6,000, again, I want us to think not in US terms. I want us to think in creation terms. So 6,000 years from the day that God created the heavens and the earth, or at least that's how it's proposed in the Bible, to 7,000 years. Now, in Gregorian time, that would be 1200 CE, 1240 CE to 2240 CE. And CE is the idea of equivalent. Now, creation day itself, we're really going to be talking about the sixth day, because on the sixth day, God created, well, first he created what we would say is the land animals. And as a part of that process, he also created man in his image, in his likeness, which was Genesis 1:26. Now, this ends with dealing with all kinds of life forms and the fact that they're now thriving. And God finishes this day by simply saying, and it was very good. Now, the theme of the sixth millennium is the theme of Adon Kadmon. That's the primal Adam. That's the first Adam. We're going to be talking about the collective. In other words, all of us were originally part of Adam, but with the fall of Adam, things fell apart. Now, the hidden foundation or the culmination of this month, the culmination of this year, the year 6,000 or 6,999 is going to be the idea of the divine kingship. By that year, the Mashiach will be ruling and reigning from Jerusalem. Our element for what they begin to look at things by elements, and this is the element of manifestation. It's the hidden becomes very tangible because all the way through our Bible, you and I both know that there are great numbers of secrets that are hidden in the text, but the secrets will be revealed by the end of this millennium. And the sixth day is simply identifying in Genesis chapter 1 what's going on. But it's about balance. It's about the final kingdom and where we're at. Now, the great work is now being completed. We're reaching the end. Soon, the bride, who is called the Shekinah, is preparing for the wedding day that will occur on the seventh day. Now, my attempt at explaining this to you is rather feeble, but hopefully you'll get to understand what's going on. The Vilna was not the only one or the first one to see this idea of the 7,000 year period. Years before he was here, Rabbi Yitzhak Luria was the first proponent that I can find or have read about. After him and after the Vilna came Sir Isaac Newton, who, well, loosely he's called a Christian. Newton was a very interesting gentleman. I've spent a lot of time reading about him. And though he's been identified as a Christian, Newton taught himself the biblical Hebrew, and he studied the Hebrew Bible extensively, not the King James, which was popular back then. And he especially studied the prophetic books, and his most generally, he focused on Daniel. Now, he called himself a restorationist. In other words, he went back as far as he could to the original faith that early humanity actually had, because he believed that Christianity was corrupted by dogmas. Now, he owned a large number of theological manuscripts and commentaries in Hebrew. His view of God and the scriptures was, well, it was highly controversial. And again, in Christianity, it was almost unconventional. Newton rejected the Trinity, making him a kind of Christian monotheist. And I would call him a B'nai Noach because that's what I am and that's what I understand. Now, he revered the Hebrew scriptures as containing the purest revelations of divine truth. Now, he saw the ancient Judaism as a prophecy or as a pure form of monotheism. And he was fascinated by the Temple of Solomon and by Jewish prophecy. He spent years studying them. Newton saw the temple's design as a divine key to understanding the cosmos. Now, something that resonates with Kabbalistic and mystical Jewish themes, he understood that that the approach had to be, well, what can I say, in a peculiar manner, through a peculiar lens. You just can't look at Judaism through the eye of a Christian. The Vilnas actually established what would be called an academy. He called this academy the Academy of Eliyahu, because the Vilnas modeled Elijah. In fact, at times he was thought to be the reincarnation of Elijah. Now, he taught that the world was destined to exist for 6,000 years. Now, the first 2,000 years, he said, was going to be tohu. Tohu is nothingness or catastrophe, chaos. The second 2,000 years were to be about Torah. And the final 2,000 years was to be about the Messiah that was coming. Now in Sanhedrin chapter or page 97a, we find that the world was created in 6 days. Now later in Psalms 70, verse 4, you can read, "Indeed, 1,000 years are in your eyes like yesterday that has passed." So in other words, 1,000 years is like a day. Now, there were other sources that Isaac Newton and Vilna read that were very Kabbalistic. In fact, one was the Zohar. The Zohar in book 118a, you're going to read, "In the 6th century of the 6th millennium," which was between 5600 and 5700 CE, corresponding to the year 1740 and 1840, "the portals of wisdom above and the fountains of wisdom below will be opened." So we're living in an age when wisdom and knowledge is available to us, and it's available in so many different ways. Now, this is alluded to in the words that are found in Genesis chapter 7. "In the 600th year of the life of Noah, the windows of heaven were open, and all the fountains of the great deep, they burst forth." Now, in another Zohar, not the original, but this one's called the Tikkun Zohar. In the 6th book, we read, "Elijah the prophet to herald the final redemption from our present exile, said to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai,"
on my phone,
who's really the primary author of the Zohar,
Zoom room wasn't on mine.
"In the end of days, in the last generation, this work of yours, the Zohar, will be revealed below. And many people will be sustained and nourished by this work. And on its account, you will proclaim freedom in the land. Redemption will come," which is what I'm finding as I begin to read the Zohar and I read the text more and more often. The Vilna understood these words were a call for all of Israel to come home. Now, he strongly believed that settling in Eretz Israel was not merely a personal mitzvah, but it was a cosmic necessity. He had reached the stage where he believed that the ingathering of the exiles and the rebuilding of Jerusalem were about to take place. Now, that's why he thought that he needed himself to go to the land, not purely there to die, but to trigger redemption. According to a lot of different sources, and especially testimonies by his disciples, the Gra, which is his nickname, I guess you would call it, left Vilna, which was the city he was in, and he left secretly because you see, he was going to end up leaving behind many of his students. Now, he told almost no one, not even his own family, because he feared of drawing attention to himself. Now, his route likely began through Poland and towards Germany and Turkey, where he began to hope to sail east on the Mediterranean towards Israel. Somehow, or however, illness and political instability forced him to turn back. Now, some say that the heavenly sign, the sign of the Bat Kol, which is a divine voice, warned him that the time was not ripe for him. So he returned home. Now, later, Kabbalistic accounts, especially among his students, say that the Gra experienced spiritual resistance. The resistance was called the Klipot, which is the forces of evil. They prevented him from entering the land before the proper hour. Now, the proper hour was now, but it was not for him. Decades later, he again prepared to leave. Now, this time, according to the traditions, he arrived in either Germany or somewhere along the Black Sea. And again, he was stopped. He was stopped by a combination of political upheaval and dangerous traveling conditions. And so once again, he was interfered with and he returned home. Now, in a letter that he later would write, he said, or I was prevented by a decree from heaven that the time had not yet arrived for me to build what must be built. So he returned to Vilna. He focused his energies instead on going to Israel, but sending his disciples to Israel, which became the foundation of what would be known in the later days as the Perushim. The word Perushim is the word for a Pharisee. So the Pharisee movement had not died out. It was just stuck in a different place. And so the Pharisee movement did go to Jerusalem, but it also went to Safed. Many of them became true mystics and Kabbalists. Now it's said that it began, well, the group began to move somewhere between 1808 and 1812. I find it fascinating that the word Parashim is better known to us today as the Zionist movement. This group chose to separate from the standard Judaism and is still alive and it's still well. And it seems what goes around really does come around. Now, within Kabbalistic circles, especially among later followers of the Gra, there was a deeper interpretation. The Gra himself saw himself as being connected to the soul of Mashiach ben Yosef. In fact, he believed that if he did not return now, the Mashiach ben Yosef, he would have the opportunity to be a part of that man through reincarnation, a figure whose role is to be involved in the restoration of Israel, even though he had been prevented and eventually the Mashiach ben Yosef will be slain, most likely, while he tries to complete his mission. So in his two attempts to ascend, his ability to complete the mission were well understood as a reenactment of a messianic drama, preparing the way for later generations. Now, I often talk about the Olam Haba, the world to come. The Jews indicate that the world to come is not about heaven, but man's return to Eden. Most Jewish scholars see the fall of Adam and Eve as slipping into a state of amnesia. Man lost Eden and gained what is worth, well, it's worth da'at, knowledge. In other words, we have lost that strong connection between heaven and earth. We are approaching the end of history as we would see it, drawing closer to the returning of the state that Adam and Eve possessed in the beginning, but lost with the fall. Right now, we are doing very little on our own in terms of reaching that end. But the light of the great Shabbat, the last millennium, is beginning to shine in our hearts and minds as we anticipate the coming of the Messiah. Many of us are getting very anxious to go home. Now, it's okay. Let's begin on this understanding regarding the final years of the sixth millennium. So I'm going to try to go step by step so that you can see how it fits with this greater idea of seven millenniums, or the week we call creation. Once again, the sages in Sanhedrin 97a teach that, well, let me share this. The world will exist for 6,000 years. Again, I've said this, 2,000 years of Tohu, chaos, 2,000 years of Torah, 2,000 years of Mashiach, and then 1,000 years of rest. Now, each day of creation would equal 1,000 years in world history. Each hour in that day would last 41 years, 8 months. That's dividing the 1,000 by 24. So you arrive at that by dividing it out. Now, finally, each minute, because they even went down to the minute, each minute would be about 0.694 years, or actually about 8 months and 10 days. And that would get us to the final minutes. because you see in the end, even the minutes are going to be important. Now, this allows us to read the divine week as a moving clock from dusk as the Jewish day begins, because remember in the Bible, the day doesn't begin at when the sun comes up. It starts in the evening. It was evening, then it was morning. That means every era of history has a corresponding spiritual hour. The sixth millennium, or the sixth day of the cosmic clock, would be from, well, 6,000 to 6,999, which, well, that's telling us it's between 1240 CE and 2240 CE. Now, that would mean that our cosmic sixth day has only 214 years left. The question is, do we really have 214 years? I find myself wondering. Now, according to tradition, and this is a tradition that I've come to understand from having gone there twice. According to tradition, on Friday afternoon, actually at Friday noon, in the days of the Old Testament, if you will, the Levium would blow silver trumpets, warning everyone to cease all work activities and begin to prepare to welcome in the Sabbath. Activities other than the preparing for the Sabbath would receive no blessings according to Pesachim 50b or Shabbat 35a or 140, 114. So the understanding is that by Friday noon, everybody begins to prepare for this coming Sabbath. Now, the question often asked is, well, why do you use a silver trumpet to announce noon? Well, it shows the Jewish people there's going to be a change in the spiritual energy for the next 6 hours. Well, actually 6 hours and 25 hours of the Sabbath, because those 6 hours of preparation are treated almost as if it was the Sabbath. It is taught that the Sabbath brings to shine or begins to shine on the world at Friday noon. But Kabbalistically, we need to understand the preparation that needed to occur prior to the beginning of the Sabbath, because that's important. For men, the preparation actually started on Wednesday and Thursday, and it only intensified on Friday morning and afternoon. By the time the darkness approached on Friday afternoon, the men and the boys had already gone to the mikveh and immersed themselves, and they dressed in their finest clothes. At home, about 18 minutes before sunset, the Jewish women and girls would light the Shabbat candles to receive Shabbat into the home, even though it is still maybe light outside. Ready or not, the light of Shabbat always enters and permeates this world on Friday night and Saturday. Now, the advantage of Judaism is their calendar. They can see time culminating in the seventh day. A miniature millennial cycle goes on. People understand that this process leads to the anticipation of the approaching millennium. So all the way back to the first day of this sixth millennium, they were already anticipating the seventh. Now, in the end, the great Shabbat will enter and permeate the world long before 2240, the end of this millennium. They also hold that this time will arrive at least 210 years early because of the pain that Israel suffered when they were under the hands of the Egyptians. Now, we are in the year 5786. 214 years left, and if 210 are already used, well, will this next millennium come early? Now, according to the Kabbalah, noon, the sixth hour on Friday, is the most dangerous hour for the Jewish people, And actually, I think it is for all people. You see, it is then that the forces of evil become, well, they just begin to rise in power. The Gra wrote that it was on the 6th hour of the 39th day that Moses went up to receive the had gone up to receive the two tablets. He faced, well, an incredible test for Israel, or there was a test for Israel while he was up there. According to the Talmud, in Shabbat 89a, Moses had been purposely vague when he said that he would return to them on the 40th day. God intended to use that idea as a test for the people. It would be the equivalent or equal to the test that Adam and Eve faced in the garden. The ultimate test that should usher in the ultimate redemption. Now, this test had to be equal to the test of God put upon Adam and Eve. So you see, Moses was to be the Adam in this story, and the Jewish people were to be Eve. It'd be the mixed multitude who would play the role of the serpent. And against God's concern, remember, Moses brought along the mixed multitude, the Erev Rav. Now, there's a side note. The question is, where was Adam when Eve was being approached by the Nahash? They had just been recently married, according to the Midrashic writings. Adam had already produced children. Adam and Eve had 2 sons, 3 daughters. And so he spent his time flying around the countryside looking for suitable places for his kids to live, not thinking that he would ever be forced out of Eden. Now, according to the Zohar, he was at the highest level spiritually that one could be at. Now, God would also take time to show him all of history for all of his ancestors. He would even be shown what would happen if he were to sin. Now, we are told that on the 6th hour of the 39th day, not the 40th, the people had miscounted the number of days, and well, he still was gone. In Exodus 32:1, we read, the people, which in this case are the Erev Rav, saw that Moses was Boshesh, late in coming down the mountain. Now, the word Boshesh, again, letters do not necessarily have vowels. Not back then. If we would have looked at it again, we might see that late in coming could have easily been read Bashesh, which literally means the 6th hour has come. So we now know the rest is history. Now, the question then became for many of us, who are the Erev Rav in our story? Now, to many, they were simply the Egyptians who had intermarried with the Jews during the exile. Moses refused to leave them behind. In other words, he saw them as, well, he didn't, but others saw them as riffraff. And again, we know that later in the book of Malachi and in the book of Ezra, the men were forced to separate from their Gentile wives when they returned from Babylon. The Zohar sees them as being Egyptian magicians who worked from midday to early afternoon. And again, it was about this great evening that would be coming. Now, these same magicians also were on the side fighting Moses and Aaron, and they could not defeat God, so they chose to follow him or follow them, Moses and Aaron. But their conversion to Judaism was only half-hearted, according to, again, the Zohar, book 2, 191a. Now, Rashi saw them as converts to Judaism from from the various nations. Modern scholarship sees them as a mass of non-Israelite strangers, including slaves and prisoners of war, who took advantage of the panic to exit and escape Egypt. I'm understanding, or I'm coming to the understanding, that there were Jews who would also be called Erev Rav, because not all Jews will make it into the world to come. So what happened in the 6th hour of this millennium? Well, this millennium is 1990 CE. Here are a few of the things that happened in that year. It was the year for the fall of communism in Russia, which led to the aliyah of Russian Jews, along with a sizable portion of the Russian mafia who ended up moving into a lot. It was also that time when there would be the return of the Ethiopian Jews. It was also the same year as we began the first Gulf War that's going to end on Purim, that would later start up again on Purim with George Bush II. Noon has passed. We are now past that point, and we are well on our way to evening and the end of this millennium. Now, according to a book called The Crown of the Covenant and a book called The Footsteps of the Messiah, these final years actually belong to Jacob and Israel. As I shared before in the book of Daniel, the 70 weeks, I understand them to be 70 Jubilees. And if they were 70 Jubilees, starting with the day that Israel walked in with Joshua's guidance into the land, from that day until October 7th, 2025, lo and behold, that accounts for all of this time. So spiritually, this millennium holds the key to what's ahead. And again, according to the Gra, it's the 6th millennium that started in 1240 and is to be known as the day of man. That is how he sees it, the era of revelation and completion. We are rapidly approaching the Sabbath of creation, the 7th day. Those who study the Tanakh understand that the 6th millennium focuses on the end, but is also about the completion of God's plan involving what we understand as Netzach. Now, I want to spend some time, not tonight, but I'm going to spend some time teaching or sharing with you my understanding about what happens after the 7th millennium. Because you see, it doesn't end then. We still have yet 3 more millenniums that I can think of that are going to occur after the Sabbath. Now, the 7th is Netzach is the 7th of the 10 Sephirot in Jewish Kabbalah. It's emphasizing endurance and victory and perpetuity. But it's only the 7th, not the 10th. When if you celebrate Pesach with the Jews, you understand that on the 2nd day, you start what's called the 50-day counting of the Omer. Those 50 days, you begin to count. And as you do, you begin to work on the Sephirot. You begin to work on the 7 Sephirot that make the body and the emotions of a man or a woman. Now, in Christianity, it is to be understood that at the end of this age, we will move into a heavenly world. But the Kabbalists, we are only halfway through their story. They hold that we are now in the story of prophecy, which is Netzach. Soon we will begin the story of Hod, which is the idea of splendor. That will be followed by Yesod, the secrets, and finally by Malkut, which is the final. That is the future lessons. And I'll give you that at the end. But next week, I plan to remind you that I'm going to be working on Daniel's 70th week, just so that you can understand how I arrived at the fact that October 7th, 2023 was a significant day, besides the fact that it was Sukkot. In fact, it was the last day of Sukkot. What happened on the last day of Sukkot this year? That is when the last Jewish hostage was released by Hamas. But it's still not over. If you've been watching TV or listening to the news, I should say, you understand that the peacekeeping troops have not been moved into Gaza. In fact, the police force in Gaza right now is Hamas. The first couple of days, I'm understanding that 60 Palestinians were assassinated, shot in the back of the head by the Hamas acting as the police. They were taking care of anybody they thought brought them down. I want to link this time again to the time of the Gentiles, because those 70 years really are the period of the Gentiles. We are no longer in that period. We're now, with the release of the hostages, that's the last day, the Monday morning. Here we are in America. We're waking up and celebrating, while in Europe, they're protesting and rioting for the Palestinians. As we move through time, Gaza is going to face either a mass extinction of Hamas if they don't lay down their weapons, or something has to happen. The war of Gog and Magog, according to most Jewish sources, will occur either during Shabbat or during the uh, this festival that we just finished, Sukkot, or during the time that they begin reading Genesis chapter 10 and the 70 nations. That will be the time when the world will see the last war, as we say it. Reports are that Hamas does not plan to relinquish their guns. Is peace at hand? I don't know. But I do know who is in charge. Shalom. I hope you